Ready to roll. Turn right. Get ready to turn right. Turn
All right,
right.
good evening, everyone. This is John Tapp with the Freightliner Cascadia. Happy Memorial Day to everyone here. This is going to be part 2 of
Get ready to turn right.
the special ride today, because this is going to be the special one. And last Saturday night, I used the Detroit DD12-OHE, which is 12 speed. So I'm using the same engine and transmission tonight. In fact, we're going to start with Idaho Falls, where I stopped at Longview, Washington. So let's go get the great pile Bayou paper towels. Go for a ride, everyone.
Keep right, and then exit right. Exit right. Keep left, and then turn left.
Comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org.
Turn left.
This is NPR.
Houston Public Media brings to you PBS World, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on TV 8.6. Experience the personal connection behind the headlines with programming devoted to telling stories that humanize complex issues. PBS World helps us understand the movements, conflicts, and cultures that connect us all. PBS World on TV 8.6 and online at houstonpublicmedia.org.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Mary Louise Kelly. President Trump's efforts to downsize the federal government by cutting thousands of jobs have gotten a lot of attention, but he also wants agencies to relocate from Washington to less costly parts of the country. This is something he tried during his first term, moving the headquarters of the Bureau of Land Management to Colorado. Colorado Public Radio's Stina Sieg reports on how that went.
The desert city of Grand Junction is nearly 2,000 miles from D.C. About 70,000 people under towering red rock cliffs beside the Colorado River. It's surrounded by public land run by the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM. Western populists have long complained that decisions about what can and can't be done on federal land are made in faraway Washington. In 2018, Colorado Senators Cory Gardner and Michael Bennet, a Republican and a Democrat, made a promotional video with the city's economic partnership.
You'll not find a better place to locate the BLM headquarters than Grand Junction. It all comes together here in Grand Junction, Colorado.
Robin Brown ran the economic partnership at the time.
I don't think anyone thought realistically little old Grand Junction would get the BLM headquarters.
She's at Grand Junction's airport, which has 6 gates.
We have 0 nonstop flights to D.C.
But in 2019, Grand Junction got its Cinderella story when President Trump told the BLM to pack up its headquarters and move it here.
It was so exciting, and it was sort of this dream come true, and everything we had worked so hard for came to fruition.
Bringing in high-paying jobs and putting Grand Junction on the map. Great decision, says William Perry Penley, who Trump appointed to run the BLM in 2019.
You want that director of the Bureau of Land Management to be out here because he or she will have firsthand knowledge of what's going on.
Dozens of former BLM officials signed a letter protesting the move, saying the agency needs leaders in D.C. to advocate for public lands in front of lawmakers and the president. Others saw an ulterior motive, to get longtime agency employees in Washington to quit, to either make the agency smaller or to replace them with people more ideologically aligned with President Trump. Penley says moving the agency west brought in fresh blood.
And I asked every one of the final applicants, I said, if this job were advertised in Washington, D.C., would you have bid on it? And every one of them said no.
But of the hundreds of jobs relocated out of Washington, only 3 employees asked to move to Grand Junction actually did. Shortly after the new headquarters opened, the pandemic mostly shut down in-person work. And the following year, President Biden moved the headquarters back to D.C. But now the debate over moving agencies out of Washington is alive again, literally.
Let's get it done. Thank you.
In Grand Junction, a conservative Colorado think tank pitted William Perry Penley against Mary Jo Rugwell, the BLM's former state director in Wyoming. Rugwell echoes the suspicions of a lot of Western liberals that Trump is trying to break federal land agencies so public lands can be privatized.
If there aren't enough people and if communication isn't good and if things don't work well, pretty easy for somebody to say, oh, you guys are doing a terrible job. We better do something else.
Get ready to turn right.
Earlier this year, Utah and a dozen other states asked the Supreme Court to give a big chunk of federal land to state governments to manage. It declined. It was a bad idea, says Rugwell. Robin Brown, whose job used to be promoting Grand Junction, says she still thinks this is the best place for the BLM's headquarters. But she's tired of it being a political pawn.
So the idea that now we're going to move the BLM headquarters back is just as disappointing as moving it away, because I just feel like, well, then we wait 4 years till the next Democratic president, and then they'll move it away again. And then, who's hurt by all of this? Our community, all those employees.
The BLM did not respond to a question about whether it plans to move its headquarters back to Grand Junction. For NPR News, I'm Stina Sieg in Grand Junction, Colorado.
The Trump administration has attempted to cut off funding for a program that provides housing to homeless Americans. Last week, a federal judge extended a ruling barring that action. It's part of a broader effort to slash federal support to democratically led cities with policies the administration disagrees with. Marisa Lagos from member station KQED in San Francisco reports on how vulnerable Americans are caught in the middle.
R.J. Sloan says he was living the American dream. He worked for a giant pharmaceutical company and owned 2 homes. Then came a health crisis.
I had a psychotic break from reality. I left my apartment, lost everything, including my 2 dogs, and I started running around San Francisco, living in Golden Gate Park, eating out of trash cans.
Sloan, who's now 60, spent several years on the streets before landing a spot at Bishop Swing Community House, a supportive housing development in San Francisco's South of Market district. It's one of 23 sites operated by the nonprofit Episcopal Community Services, housing more than 2,000 people in the Bay Area. When he first moved in, Sloan says just surviving was a struggle.
My first 5 years here, I wore the same clothes every single day. I never changed my clothes. I rarely showered or brushed my teeth. I was in such a bottomed out phase of life.
Sloan eventually started getting better. He says it wasn't just because he had a safe place to live. It was also the support, mental health services, medical care, and importantly, case managers who encouraged him to continue moving forward when he was ready.
You're encouraged to make your appointments. You're encouraged to keep up with the goals that you set. So I began working part-time as a front desk clerk.
That work at a nearby homeless shelter now helps pay for Sloan's apartment, but the bulk of the rent is paid for by the federal government through a U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development program known as Continuum of Care. It's money that local governments and their nonprofit partners, like Episcopal Community Services, rely on to tackle homelessness, and they're at risk of losing it. In the Bay Area, Santa Clara County receives about $34 million a year from the program. San Francisco gets around $50 million annually. The 2 Bay Area counties are among dozens of local governments around the nation suing the Trump administration over new grant conditions announced earlier this year. Tony Lopresti is Santa Clara County's chief counsel.
Our ability to really make progress combating homelessness and making sure that those families have not only shelter but the services that they need really hinges in large part on our ability to access these federal funds.
Under the new rules, local governments have to certify that they do not have DEI programs, don't promote, quote, gender ideology, unquote, and don't have sanctuary immigration policies. HUD didn't respond to a request for comment, but in a post on X, HUD Secretary Scott Turner defended the shift as a way to push back against what he called a woke agenda. Lopresti says the new conditions are illegal and so vague they're impossible to comply with. Earlier this month, a federal judge sided with the counties, ordering a temporary halt to the new grant conditions, meaning that for now, the grant funding is safe. But that could change in the future. If the counties lose these ongoing legal battles, it'll pose difficult choices for organizations that operate housing developments like the Bishop Swing House in San Francisco.
If it disappeared, then we would certainly be challenged, right, to be able to keep these buildings funded and operating.
That's Beth Stokes, Executive Director of Episcopal Community Services. She says her organization will try to find funding to help keep Sloan and others in their apartments, but they may have to delay future projects aimed at getting even more homeless people off the streets. For NPR News, I'm Marisa Lagos in San Francisco.
Former Congressman Charles Rangel has died. A Democrat, he represented a New York City district, including the historically black neighborhood of Harlem, for nearly 50 years. Rangel once joked with voters,
"You know, modesty is not really my best trait."
Charlie Rangel was born in Harlem. He served in the U.S. Army and the Korean War. He returned to New York and was elected to the House of Representatives in 1970. For decades, he served on the House Ways and Means Committee, which shapes tax law. In 2007, he became the first black member to chair that committee.
We have an obligation, whether people are in Mississippi or whether they're in Las Vegas, to help people. I think that if you're old and crippled and poor, we should say, not in our country.
That was Rangel speaking with NPR's Steve Inskeep as he prepared to take on the position. Rangel often worked to shape tax law for his causes, like affordable housing. He was also a founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus. In 2008, then Senator Barack Obama accepted the Democratic Party's nomination for president. Here's what Rangel had to say about that to NPR.
To me, it's the most exciting thing that's happened since the possible exception of the Voting Rights Act. And I've been telling everybody that I marched with Dr. King in the 60s, 54 miles from Selma to Montgomery. And I cussed every step of the way. I said, what a big mistake. What am I doing here? Because I had no idea of the history-making value of that sacrifice, and that Lyndon Johnson would be persuaded to sign the Voting Rights Act. So I tell everyone, don't let that happen to you.
Rangel was also the subject of a 2010 House ethics investigation for his own financial transactions. That year, he was reelected by an overwhelming margin, but he was found guilty of ethics violations and censured by his House colleagues. It cost him his committee chairmanship. Still, he told NPR's Michelle Martin the following year,
"This has been a fascinating experience. It's like an unending postgraduate course, and to be able to see the changes in your community, the nation, and the world, and to be a part of it, and to be able to change things, it is something that you really can't describe."
Charles Rangel died today. His family confirmed he was 94 years old. This is All Things Considered from NPR News.
Support comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, committed to strengthening the state's workforce and its communities through safety and wellness grants and education initiatives. More at texasmutual.com/community impact. Support for Houston Public Media comes from CertaPro Painters, offering residential and commercial painting services, from color consultations to full project management. Estimates and more at CertaPro.com.
Did you know 80% of our funding comes from listeners like you, right here in Houston? That's why your support is so important. When you give to Houston Public Media, you're investing in trusted news and educational programming that millions depend on daily. Every dollar you give makes a difference, ensuring this public service stays strong for everyone in our community. Help us support this mission. Give today at HoustonPublicMedia.org or call 888-909-0887.
Houston Public Media exists for and by the will of Southeast Texas. We appreciate our visionary supporters for enabling us to be the essential source for independent journalism and programs that inform, inspire, and engage all Houstonians. Angela Bishop, Judy and Dr. James Bozeman, Andrea B. Bryant, Kathy Butler, the Michael and Rebecca Simo Foundation, Janet F. Clark, Marion and Paul Cones. Thank you.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
There you are.
One day the phone rang.
Hello. Hello.
And it was him.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, there we go.
What's shaking?
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hey.
Let me introduce you to someone.
Okay.
He was just the most charming, welcoming, open, beguiling person you could possibly imagine. And he was nuts, which was a lot of fun.
Say hello to Awesome every week on Radio.
Saturdays at 9 p.m. on News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from the Kauffman Foundation, providing access to opportunities that help people achieve financial stability, upward mobility, and economic prosperity, regardless of race, gender, or geography. Kauffman.org. From the Walton Family Foundation, working to create access to opportunity for people and communities by tackling tough social and environmental problems. More information is at waltonfamilyfoundation.org. And from the listeners who support this NPR station.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Mary Louise Kelly. The U.S. needs jaguars. Yes, the jungle cat. They used to roam much of the country, from Southern California to Texas, maybe beyond. Then, around the early 1900s, poaching ramped up. Ranchers feared the cats were preying on cattle, and jaguars were basically hunted out. Enter a project across the border in Mexico that works with ranchers to protect jaguars and might bode well for efforts to restore them to the U.S. Benji Jones went to take a look and wrote about it for Vox. Benji Jones, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why does the U.S. need Jaguars? And I guess I'll start by saying I didn't know that they're an American species.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that they're an American species. And you're right, they likely came into the U.S. before making their way down in their evolutionary history to Central and South America. So they truly are a U.S. species. And in terms of why we need jaguars, I mean, we really need these cats for the ecosystems because they play a vital role in the food chain as the top predators. They help control other species below them, which then control the grass and so forth. So they really are an integral part of the ecosystem.
Okay, so let me take you across the border, Sonora, Mexico, and this project I mentioned, which launched a few years ago now, back in 2007. What is it called? How does it work?
Yeah, so it's a really innovative project called Viviendo con Felinos, which just means living with felines or cats, wild cats. And so in Sonora, which is the northern Mexico state just below Arizona, there's also this issue where you have ranchers in some cases killing jaguars for their perceived, because they believe that they attacked their calves, and calves are very important to the ranchers because they sell them and that's their livelihood. And so this project is trying to change the perspective of ranchers and provide an opportunity for them to live more harmoniously with jaguars and other wild cats by essentially paying them for the presence of these cats on their ranches.
And it's through photography. Explain that.
Yeah, it's really amazing. So one thing that's interesting about jaguars is that they are really hard to see face to face. They're sort of these like ghosts on the landscape that you just never see. So people who have worked in these regions of Mexico for a very long time never see them face to face. But if you put out motion cameras, so cameras that activate every time something walks by, they will detect these very elusive creatures. And so what this project does is actually put these motion sensing cameras around the ranch, and then those cameras will detect the cats, and every time they detect a new jaguar or a puma, those ranchers will get paid for that detection. So basically it's creating this incentive to keep these cats on their land.
How much is a picture of a jaguar worth if you are a rancher in Mexico?
Yes. So a picture of a jaguar is worth 5,000 pesos, Mexican pesos each, which is about $260 in today's US dollars. I should say 5,000 Mexican pesos is similar to what someone in Mexico might make for killing a jaguar. So ranchers that think they have a problem with jaguars killing their calves, in the past at least, would pay cowboys to kill jaguars, and they might pay them around $5,000. And that was very deliberate to try to make this payment of a photo of a live jaguar similar to what you could make for killing them.
Okay, so to the question of how this program might inform what happens with the jaguar population here in the U.S., like, what is the link there?
So we used to have jaguars from Southern California all the way to Texas and maybe even Louisiana, and there's no longer a breeding population of cats in that region. The northernmost breeding population of jaguars in the world is around this reserve, is around these ranches that I was talking about. And so if you want to have jaguars return to the southern U.S. without physically transporting them, you need a healthy population in Sonora that could naturally migrate north over time. And so the idea is that if you can protect this population in Sonora, figure out how to avoid this retaliatory killing of the cats, you might see a northward migration into the U.S. Then, of course, the question becomes, okay, well, what about the border and the border wall? And that's a whole other problem.
Benji Jones is an environmental correspondent at Vox. Thanks for sharing your reporting.
Thanks so much, Mary Louise.
When you picture a pickup, you might imagine a big truck towering over the rest of traffic, but a new truck has hit the roads of the U.S., and it is not what you are used to, as Casey Martin from KUOW in Seattle reports.
Tonali Gruder runs a flower farm on an island north of Seattle.
On a regular basis, we'd be loading heavy tables and buckets and doing a lot of setup, pop-up tents, all these different things. And it was very, very physical, and it was hard on us.
They used to work out of a Chevy Express van, but it was hard to get in and out of. Then they discovered K-trucks, tiny Japanese pickups that have a small cab but a large bed in the back. Gruder knew they had to get one, and not just any K-truck.
Specifically the fire trucks.
Drive safe.
Come with a lot of racking and sort of accessories built into them that are very suitable to farming.
These are small, often even smaller than a sedan. Not the fastest vehicles, they top out at about 70 miles per hour, but tough and reliable. And they're usually well maintained by fire departments with very low miles. Many still have their lights, PA systems, and as you can hear, their sirens. Which comes in handy if you slow down traffic.
So we're able to put on our lights as flashers, hop on our intercom, and let people know, thanks for supporting local farms. This vehicle is slow. We will pull over when we can.
Adam Kovanak is a dealer who buys cars in Japan to import to the U.S. He says he's seen a real uptick in K-trucks on the West Coast in the last 10 years, with cars being sent from Japan to ports in Seattle, San Francisco, and L.A. Several dealers said most of the cars stay on the West Coast, but they've also sold to buyers in Texas and North Carolina. According to Kovanak, you used to be able to pick one up for about $5,000. Today, that's closer to $10,000, but it hasn't curbed demand.
So it's not uncommon for them to have a deposit before they land.
Kovanak says K-trucks first started showing up in the U.S. when large factories, universities, and zoos bought them as utility vehicles. Then they really caught on with Japanese car enthusiasts and drivers wanting a truck with a smaller footprint.
They are really easy to like. They're inexpensive, they're easy to park, they're pretty reliable, pretty durable. You park them for a year, you turn the key, they start right up.
Most of the K-trucks driving around are from the mid to late 90s. That's due to federal restrictions on importing K-trucks less than 25 years old. So they often need new parts and
then turn right.
That's where Tuan Huynh can help. He runs a Facebook group where thousands of K-truck fans swap tips and advice. Huynh took me out for a drive recently. I climbed in on the right side where the steering wheel is.
Getting it on this side is so weird.
If you get in an accident on the freeway, you're going to die, so at least it'll be quick.
Okay, here we go.
That Facebook page is where Huynh met Daniel Tan. Tan works in professional racing, so he knows serious car people and car culture. Usually, there's a lot of talk about speed and horsepower. But K-truck owners, he says, are much more lighthearted.
The K-truck community is just like, hey, I painted it like a panda, and it looks like a panda now. It's just a quirky group of people.
They may be popular here in Washington, but in some states, like Oregon, you can't register K-trucks. Oregon's Department of Transportation says they're not built for American highways. They don't even have airbags. Colorado just legalized them, but K-lovers there will have to wait until 2027 to register one. For NPR News, I'm Casey Martin in Seattle.
This is NPR News.
Support comes from Signify Business Cash by Wells Fargo. With this business credit card, cardholders can earn rewards on business purchases with no caps or categories to track. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/signify. Terms apply.
You count on Houston Public Media because you understand how important a free press is to a healthy society.
We're not chasing ratings. We're not owned by a corporation. We're here to inform you with facts, context, and clarity.
When you give today, you're helping protect journalism that serves you, not a political agenda or a bottom line.
Support this public service now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Houston Grand Opera, opening the 25-26 season with Porgy and Bess, featuring music by George Gershwin, blending jazz, blues, and spirituals. Tickets available now at hgo.org.
Marketplace is supported by Commvault. When companies face ransomware and outages, they can recover data and business in just minutes with Commvault.
On the program today, the vibes are weird, the housing market's emotional, and nostalgia is making a comeback. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Progressive Insurance, helping protect small businesses and the owners that run them. Whether a plumber, accounting business, or restaurant, Progressive can help with over 30 customizable coverages. Online quotes available in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. And by WSJ Plus, a news bundle that brings together business and finance insights from the Wall Street Journal, MarketWatch, Barron's, and Investors Business Daily, all on one platform, so readers can explore every angle. And by Odoo, dedicated to providing software designed to scale with businesses. Odoo's programs for manufacturing, accounting, and more aim to provide building blocks for creating a custom software suite. Odoo, what small businesses need.
In Portland, Oregon, I'm Rima Jerez in for Kai Risdal. It is Monday, 26th of May. Good to have you with us on this Memorial Day. This week, we'll be getting a trove of economic data, including a couple of important indicators. On Thursday, we're getting the first revision of GDP for the first quarter of this year. That's a more refined reading of the strength of our economy. Then on Friday, we'll get the Fed's favorite measure of inflation, also known as the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, or PPI. That data will cover April. So what might these numbers tell us? Stephanie Hughes has that one.
This week's revision of GDP could well confirm what the first estimate showed, that the U.S. economy shrank.
The second estimate, they've got more data. It's apt to show slightly slower consumer spending. If that's the only thing that changes, you probably have a bigger contraction in GDP growth.
Wells Fargo economist Tim Quinlan says this first quarter, a lot of the apparent slowdown was due to companies importing goods like crazy to get ahead of tariffs. But what the revised number for January, February, and March doesn't tell us is how tariffs themselves hit the economy, because a lot of them hadn't happened yet.
We had an earthquake in April. We had a more significant change to trade policy than we've experienced, certainly in the last 80 years, arguably in the last century.
Also out this week, the PCE price index for April. Last year, this would have been an event.
Anything that was a gauge of inflation was so massively important that financial markets absolutely hinged on the slightest development.
If PCE sneezed, the financial markets got a cold. But now Quinlan says markets might not even say Gesundheit, because the data, it is so last month.
It's still before the impact of tariffs are really kind of having their full pass-through effect on inflation. So I'm not trying to be a bummer and be like, none of this data matters, but I kind of feel like it's a little bit inconsequential.
These backwards-looking data points do give us a better sense of where the economy is, because they give us a clearer picture of where it's been.
They're useful because they give us a standard, sort of reliable, comprehensive snapshot of the economy.
Middlebury College economics professor Christina Sargent says both GDP and PCE are like the grades she gives her students after the semester is over.
They don't change the performance of a student over the course of the semester, but they do give a clear summary of how the economy or the student performed.
And just like an employer might look at a grade to decide whether to give a student a job, policymakers at the Federal Reserve look at these economic reports to decide if they should raise or lower interest rates. And Sargent says they look at all of the grades before they make a final decision.
The Fed's not going to rely on any one data point anyway. The trend is really important.
As most college students can tell you, some grades are part of a pattern, and some, good or bad, are just one-time blips. I'm Stephanie Hughes for Marketplace.
U.S. markets were closed for the holiday, but with President Trump delaying his promise of 50% tariffs on the EU, the global markets certainly are moving. Details when we do the numbers. There's another important economic indicator we'll be getting this week, a vibe check, if you will, for this economy. It's the Conference Board's U.S. Consumer Confidence Survey. The last time it came out, back in April, consumers' short-term outlook was the most pessimistic it's been since 2011, which is weird, considering the strength of the indicators Stephanie Hughes just talked about. So for now, we're not in a recession, but the vibes are off. Here's Marketplace's Elizabeth Troval.
We all learned the word vibecession back in 2022 in the relatively strong Biden-era economy. Consumers were cranky because they were still adjusting to all those post-pandemic price increases, says Stanford's Neil Mahoney.
It was just taking time for people to sort of digest the impacts of inflation.
In other words, the bad vibes had to do with trouble behind us. Mahoney says this time, consumers are pessimistic because they're worried about trouble ahead.
I think the fear of the future is corroborated by some other data. Like Walmart, other retailers have announced that they will increase prices.
Consumers are also confused about the future economy, says Camelia Cunin with the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
There is this unbelievably high level of uncertainty with respect to what economic policies will actually be put in place in the near future to the medium term. And so it is very hard to be confident in the future of the U.S. economy when you have no idea about how international trade is going to happen.
Another reason why consumer sentiment is meh, the high cost of borrowing, says Harvard lecturer Jed Kramer.
Interest rates, how much they have to pay to borrow money on their credit cards, how much they would have to pay to get a mortgage.
None of those are included in measures of inflation.
And because during the Biden administration, we saw mortgage rates shoot up a lot as we tried to deal with the inflation, that really got consumers on edge.
And mortgage rates are still relatively high today, but consumers may still find reasons to be cheerful. Consumer sentiment has been falling for most of 2025, but Kayla Brune, who looks at daily consumer data for Morning Consult, says it's changing course.
As we've seen some kind of softening in trade stances and the deals announced with the UK and China, the trade war sort of de-escalating, we have started to see that cause some improvement in consumer sentiment.
So Brune says she does expect rosier consumer confidence data later this week. I'm Elizabeth Troball for Marketplace.
Turn left.
A so-called starter home, the emphasis here being on starter, now costs more than $1 million in roughly 230 cities across the U.S. That's according to a recent report out from Zillow. California, unsurprisingly, tops the list. But half of all U.S. states have at least one city where even an entry-level home crosses the $1 million mark. And remember, mortgage rates are now topping 7%. And I should say, we are not talking about luxury homes. Starter homes are the bottom third of the market in a given area. I host a Marketplace podcast called This Is Uncomfortable, and recently I talked with a couple, Chantal and Travis Lipsack, about their first-time home buying journey in Seattle. Both work high-paying tech jobs, and their budget was around $900,000. And they told me that their search tested them not just financially, but emotionally too.
I was just exhausted because I'm not kidding when I said it was over 2 years of looking at homes. We went to so many open houses. We had 3 different iterations of agents. So I would probably not be off by saying we saw at least like 150 homes. We would go and see like 3 to 4 homes on a weekend.
You were on Zillow all the time.
Yeah, that was my favorite.
And we saw a bunch. Yeah, I like walked you away from the cliff a few times.
At the time, Chantal and Travis were living in a tiny studio apartment, and they kept returning to the same argument.
We can wait another year, live in this apartment, save up some money, and then we can go and look at like houses that are slightly more expensive, but will be a better fit for us.
I thought that argument was invalid because the housing market continues to grow. So I was like, we're just going to get priced out every single year. So Travis is like, well, if we wait 5 years, we can save X thousands of dollars. And I was like, and then in 5 years, all these homes have appreciated 4X that amount. So I don't know what you think you're saving.
You just really wanted a house, and you wanted to get one soon. It was like, this is what I want before we have kids, so we can kind of check the box off and make sure we're safe and we have our own space.
Eventually, months into their search, Travis told Chantal, if we're going to keep looking, then it makes sense to raise our budget so we get better options. They started touring $1 million homes, and that's when they came across a beautiful 1900s craftsman with a view of a lake.
I just didn't think we would have a morning coffee looking at Lake Washington. To me, I was like, this is such a huge selling point.
I think the total house size is like 1,400 square feet, but it felt big. And there's like a cool little attic space. And when we both saw it, we were like, oh, this would be perfect for kids because it's like carpeted.
Chantal wanted to make an offer right away. Travis wasn't so sure. Why were you hesitant?
I think we just needed to look at more houses in the price range, because we had basically increased our price range and started looking around, but we just hadn't seen a lot.
And how did you respond, Chantal?
I was very adamant on the fact that I was like, I make a lot of my life changes around maximizing my savings to buy this house, and now I'm ready to buy this house, and you're pulling me down by telling me I need to wait even longer when I now feel ready and I feel like I have the resources to do it, and I just didn't think that was fair.
Some context here. Chantal, on top of her high-paying tech job, also waited tables, bringing in an extra $40,000 a year to go toward a house. She also had stock options from a previous job. So she was prepared to put down her savings, $500,000 towards this down payment. One night, feeling frustrated, she issued an ultimatum. He could agree to buy the house with her, or she'd do it on her own.
I was probably teary-eyed, saying, like, I looked at my bank account today, like, I did the numbers, like, I can put down this down payment without you, like, you can just be pretty much my roommate in this house and pay me my fair share of the mortgage.
How did you feel when she said that?
I was definitely hurt. I definitely told her I felt like she was trying to blackmail me.
Yes, no, it was definitely manipulative. Oh, I can look back and be like, that was toxic.
Well, and I imagine it also was bleeding into a lot of your interactions. Like, I feel like sometimes when there's, like, a thing that is taking up a lot of the oxygen in the relationship, it's hard for it to not bleed into everything. Did you feel like that, or were you able to compartmentalize?
Oh, I cannot compartmentalize. I'm not capable of that.
It definitely bled over. Like, we would kind of be upset at each other. It was a thing that was always, like, hanging over us, because I need to defend my points more. I need to be like, what I'm thinking, like, the stuff I'm saying isn't crazy. It would definitely make it more polarizing. Because I bet, like, Chantal at the same time would feel the same way.
So then how did you all get to the point where you were putting in an offer?
Travis, how did that happen?
How did that happen?
How did I convince you?
Well,
how much pride?
Yeah. Lots of talking from Chantal, lots of convincing. At some point, I'm like, Chantal, I don't hate the house. I will, like, if you're so into this that I'm gonna be there to support you.
They put in an offer, and it was accepted. In the end, Travis contributed $50,000 to the down payment, and Chantal put down $500,000.
I have no savings to my name, but Travis could pay this mortgage on his own if I did quit my job today.
How did it feel to sign the paperwork when you bought the house?
Oh, wow. A mix of relief, because I could delete Zillow, and I got so much of my time back in the evenings.
So it felt real when we got the keys, and it was pretty exciting.
We're going to be in the water this whole summer. Get ready.
That was Travis and Chantal Lipsack in Seattle, Washington. You can hear their story on This Is Uncomfortable, the podcast that I host for Marketplace. Find it wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up,
Hotels.com is owned by Expedia, and Expedia also owns Travelocity and Orbitz and Cheap Tickets.
And you thought you had choices. But first, let's do the numbers. Markets here in the U.S. were closed today in observance of Memorial Day. Today's also a holiday in the U.K. It has the unforgettable name, Spring Bank Holiday. Down on the actual continent of Europe, though, markets were very much open after waking up to news of President Trump deciding that next week wasn't the best time for the U.S. to impose a 50% tax on European exports to the U.S. He decided to postpone the tariffs until July so trade negotiators get a chance to, negotiate. The delay made for a great day in Frankfurt, where the DAX was up 1.7%, and in Paris, where the CAC 40 rose 1.2%. The continent-wide Stocks Europe 600 pocketed 1%, which brings it right back to where it was before Trump announced the new EU tariff plan on Friday. No bond trading here today either. The yield on the 10-year T-note is 4.51%. You're listening to Marketplace.
The Numbers is supported by Mercury, a fintech that offers banking, credit cards, and financial software. Marketplace is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager, allowing users who work remotely to share information securely wherever they go for summer travel. Available at bitwarden.com. And by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to raising awareness and accelerating action on America's fiscal challenges to build a brighter economic future for the next generation. Learn more at pgpf.org. And by Amazon Business, dedicated to helping businesses save time on office tasks and empower leaders with business buying solutions that support teams to focus on growing the business. Learn about smart business buying at amazonbusiness.com.
This is Ernie Manous, and I'd like to thank everyone for checking out our new talk show, Hello Houston.
Hi, Ernie. I have a couple of things. You guys are pushing all my buttons.
Okay, give us a couple of things.
Oh, my God. Thank you so much.
I'm Frank Billingsley. Not only can you listen to us on the News 88.7 airwaves, but you can watch us on the Houston Public Media YouTube page.
Hi, Ernie, and hi, Frank, and
Celeste.
Won't let you forget it.
And I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman. It's Hello Houston, where Houston talks, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. right here on News 88.7.
Support comes from John Moore, helping with plumbing, electrical, and air conditioning repairs, including out-of-warranty units since 1965. Details at 730-2525 or at johnmooreservices.com. Support comes from Carr, Riggs & Ingram, CPAs and Advisors, a top 25 nationally ranked full-service accounting and advisory firm offering tax, audit, accounting, consulting, and advisory services. Learn more at cricpa.com.
This is Marketplace. I'm Rena Pace. Maybe you remember it, the Ground Round. It had burgers, steak platters, bottomless popcorn, maybe a few peanut shells on the floor. If you grew up in the Northeast or Midwest, there's a chance it was part of your childhood. You know, the kind of place someone brings up today and you think, I haven't thought about that in years. The chain peaked in the 80s, then mostly vanished after going bankrupt in the early 2000s. But now, as WBUR's Solon Kelleher explains, it might be making a comeback.
Before the Olive Garden had all the salad and breadsticks you could want, before Chili's sang of their baby back, baby back, baby back, there was the Ground Round.
And who could forget the Ground Rounds and T-bone steaks?
The old Howard Johnson's opened the restaurant chain starting in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts back in 1969. The idea was to convert their underperforming restaurants for travelers into affordable, family-friendly neighborhood joints.
Good news today at the Ground Round. You get a whole lot more at the Ground Round. You get a whole lot more. What's the good news?
The Ground Round grew to over 200 locations in the 1980s, with zany draws like soft serve that came in mini baseball cap cups and pay-what-you-weigh deals.
Right now, kids pay what they weigh, just a penny a pound.
Only 38 cents.
The Ground Round changed ownership several times, but by the turn of the millennium, it became kind of old-fashioned. The chain filed for bankruptcy in 2004. Now, 20 years later, a Shrewsbury couple named Joseph and Nachi Shea are taking a shot at reopening the Ground Round. They bought the branding rights in 2024.
We're just a husband and wife team. We don't have investors or deep pockets with bootstrapping this.
When they announced the plans to reopen on social media, some who fondly remember the Ground Round were excited. Nachi Shea says some customers even gifted them Ground Round memorabilia from years past.
People have brought in different menus. They've brought in even employee manuals from the old one. We had a lady bring in her old suspenders from when she used to work at the original Ground Round here in town.
Some of those mementos now hang on the walls at the new restaurant. The couple hopes that nostalgia is enough to bring guests through the door, at least for a first visit.
As a kid being there, I think I remember the soda and the burger.
Steve Clark is president of the Massachusetts Restaurant Association.
Going there and having salty popcorn.
He says that the reopening comes at a time when consumers want to spend their money not just on food, but on a good time.
The cost of everything is up, inflation, household budgets, etc. The consumer wants the experience they're getting from a full-service dining restaurant, but they don't want the price that you have to get from a fine dining place.
That's one reason the Ground Round may be better poised for success in the 2020s than, say, in the 90s. Fast casual restaurants have been on the rise, more so than fast food chains these days. It's 20 minutes after doors open on a Thursday, and the dining room is filling up. Food runners carry trays of burgers and fish and chips out of the kitchen.
Thank you for calling the Ground Round. How can I help you?
Nachi Shea fields a call where someone wants to rent out the restaurant for a party of 30 to 40 people. Soon, there's a 30-minute wait for tables, and the bar is already full. That's where I meet Kristen Richards and Heather Dudko, who are sipping on cocktails, a lemon drop and a blueberry bello, and eating popcorn.
Awesome. Yeah. And the smell, that kind of takes you back. The popcorn smell.
The Shays aren't sure yet if they'll expand beyond this location. But if selling nostalgia works here, they say it's a possibility. In Shrewsbury, I'm Solon Kelleher for Marketplace.
Nearing the end of Memorial Day weekend. Of course, one of the biggest travel times of the year. AAA predicted that roughly 45 million people were going to hit the road this long weekend, which would be a new record. And it's safe to say a good chunk of folks use websites like Expedia or Booking.com to arrange their travel, which leads me to a listener question in our Every Now and Again series, I've Always Wondered. Melissa Hoffman in Westbrook, Maine wrote, how do sites like Expedia and Booking.com work? Do they purchase or reserve the rooms ahead of time? And are they profitable? Marketplace's Sean McHenry takes it from there.
Conceptually, online travel agents, or OTAs for short, are to analog travel agents what Amazon is to department stores. You can get the same stuff, but the former uses technology to really scale up.
So typically, a great place to start is at Google and just type in, Las Vegas hotels.
That's Chris Anderson, professor at the Nolan School of Hotel Administration at Cornell. So I just typed in Las Vegas hotel, and tell me about what we're seeing on this search page right now.
All right, so we see all these sponsored listings, right? So you see here Expedia, Hotels.com, Booking.com. Those are online travel agents.
And since Expedia was at the top of the list, that's what I clicked on. Once the page loaded, one of the first things I saw was a big ad for a hotel to Fontainebleau, Vegas, splashed over the side of the screen.
So those are typical display ads, right? So they have, pay for that exposure to generate this traffic.
When Expedia reported earnings for 2024, ad revenue was the fastest growing segment for the year. So to partially answer Melissa's question, that's one way they earn money. I decided to click on another hotel, which brought me to something more in my price range. I haven't seen a link to the hotel website, and tell me about that. If I'm looking around.
You're never going to find that here. If that link was here, then Expedia would run the risk of losing you to transact somewhere else.
I used to work for OTA 15 years ago. Okay, now before I start teaching.
Siddhan Dogan is now an assistant professor of instruction at the University of South Florida's School of Hospitality and Tourism Management.
The OTA is acting like intermediaries and earning a commission for each booking that is made by the customer through the platform.
So back to Melissa's question on how OTAs work. They have contracts with hotels to list rooms in real time. Then, when customers book one of those rooms, the OTAs earn a commission.
Usually, they make something between 10% and 25%, depends on the contract between the OTA and the service provider.
Remember how Expedia and Hotels.com came up at the top of my Google search? There's something else to know about this whole industry.
Well, a consumer may not know that Hotels.com is owned by Expedia, and Expedia also owns Travelocity and Orbitz and Cheap Tickets. Booking owns Priceline, so they're not such a variety out there as you may think.
Lorraine Cilio is the founder of Focusrite Research.
Yeah, they have a big presence online, and yes, they probably represent about half of the online market. Against the other half is people going direct to AA.com, Hilton.com, everything, right? So They don't own the market.
The outlooks for OTAs could be a little turbulent. Expedia reported in their earnings for the first quarter that bookings had slowed due to how people were feeling about the economy right now. You know, the word uncertainty we're always talking about. But despite that, Cilio thinks OTAs have staying power.
Traditionally, when we thought that OTAs would be in the cellar, maybe because of something like 9/11 or, you know, the whole financial crisis of 2009, those were actually good years following those crises. They were good years for OTAs.
She noted that some OTAs make it especially easy to cancel trips, a perk when uncertainty is high. Though, word of warning, canceling doesn't mean you get to avoid fees, so be sure to read the fine print. In Los Angeles, I'm Sean McHenry for Marketplace.
This series does not work without you. So let us know what you've always wondered. There's a place you can do it at our website, marketplace.org/wonder.
Marketplace is supported by Odoo, dedicated to providing software designed to scale with businesses. Odoo's programs for manufacturing, accounting, and more aim to provide building blocks for creating a custom software suite. Odoo, what small businesses need. And by Ascendium Education Group, which is committed to making education and training after high school a reality for learners from low-income backgrounds.
This final note on the way out today, filed under, are movie theaters really dying? People packed the theaters this weekend to watch Lilo and Stitch and Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible movie. The Lilo and Stitch remake is on track to make $183 million domestically, making this Memorial Day a box office record. Compare that to last year, when the total holiday haul was just $132 million, one of the worst showings in decades. All to say, the industry is crossing its fingers that this weekend is a sign of a packed summer of movies. Our daily production team includes Andy Corbin, Nicholas Guillong, Maria Hollenhorst, Iru Ikbanobi, Sarah Leeson, Sean McHenry, and Sophia Terenzio. And I'm Rima Jerez. We'll be back tomorrow.
This is Matt Harrop. There's been a lot of news to cover in Houston over the last few months. Keep listening to Houston Public Media for the latest, and if you've got a car, truck, boat, or RV you don't need anymore, donate it to the station. It could be worth hundreds of dollars in support. The donation process is easy for you, and we'll pick up your vehicle in any condition. Here's how to get started. Go to houstonpublicmedia.org/cars to learn more. Thank you.
Your support allows Houston Public Media to be a vital source of education and connection, providing free access to programming for all ages. We are grateful to these Catalyst supporters. Their generosity fuels our ability to innovate and be prepared for whatever the future may lead. John Bradshaw, Estate of John Iman, Margaret and Vince Foster, Estate of Marcia Moore, Estate of Billy Winkleman, and the Wortham Foundation. Thank you.
Keep left.
This is your NPR station, News 88.7, KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at HoustonPublicMedia.org and listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
So the way these Shenyun shows work, they put on hundreds of shows a year during their world tour, and in each location, most of the costs are taken on by local followers of Falun Gong. And if the shows do well, they get their money back. But if the shows lose money, the followers are the ones responsible for making up that shortfall.
I'm Rachel Abrams. That's coming up on The Daily from the New York Times.
The Daily is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager for Business, designed to work anywhere on any device, from home to the office and beyond. Learn more at bitwarden.com. For everything you need to know about the most important stories of the day, You're listening to The Daily from the New York Times, distributed by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Around 50 people were injured when a British man's minivan plowed into a crowd of people celebrating Liverpool's soccer club win today. Police say 27 were taken to the hospital and more than 20 others were treated on the spot. 4 children are among the injured. Jenny Sims, Assistant Chief Constable, says one person is in custody.
The car stopped at the scene and a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area was arrested. We believe him to be the driver of the vehicle. Extensive inquiries are ongoing to establish the circumstances leading up to the collision.
There's no word on a motive, but police say they don't believe this is terrorism. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer thanked police for their quick response and said that his thoughts are with those injured or affected. Tens of thousands of Liverpool fans had come out amid wet weather to celebrate the team. Los Angeles has the highest number of homeless vets in the country. It's also got a massive, nearly 400-acre Veterans Affairs campus in the middle of West LA. Advocates have fought in the courts and in the streets for decades to use that campus for housing for needy veterans. President Trump signed an executive order that could change everything, as NPR's Quill Lawrence reports.
A lawsuit back in 2011 forced the VA to start building housing on the campus, but it's been slow. On May 9th, President Trump released an executive order that the West LA VA campus will be transformed to house and care for 6,000 homeless veterans by 2028. Iraq vet Rob Reynolds works with homeless vets in and outside the gates.
I'm very thankful that President Trump took this position, that with this executive order, that this is a soldier's home and it was donated for that reason, and that we need to get our veterans off the street.
In the past, VA officials opposed putting so many troubled veterans in one place, but advocates in LA are taking Trump's executive order as a win. Quill Lawrence, NPR News, Los Angeles.
King Charles and Queen Camilla are in Canada for a 2-day royal visit. Emma Jacobs reports the visit is seen as a show of support for Canada's sovereignty.
King Charles is Canada's ceremonial head of state, and this is his first visit to Canada since his coronation in 2023. The King and Queen Camilla arrived in the capital city of Ottawa and were greeted on the tarmac by Prime Minister Mark Carney, who extended the invitation for this visit. The royal couple participated in a series of public events around Ottawa. On Tuesday, the King will preside over the opening of Canada's latest session of Parliament, a symbolic gesture that is seen as lending support to Canada and its current political order amid talk of possible annexation by President Trump. For NPR News, I'm Emma Jacobs in Montreal.
U.S. futures contracts are trading higher at this hour. You're listening to NPR News from Washington. In France, angry farmers have joined disgruntled striking taxi drivers, united over 2 separate issues. The farmers are protesting an agricultural bill that deals with regulations around water and pesticide use, and taxi drivers are protesting changes to the fare structure for medical transport. A taxi strike last week blocked hundreds of miles of roads around Paris. Hell's Canyon, which is on the border between Oregon and Idaho, is the deepest river canyon in the United States. And as NPR's Nell Greenfield-Boyce reports, scientists say they now know how old this canyon is.
At its deepest point, Hell's Canyon goes down almost 8,000 feet. Matthew Morris is with the Utah Geological Survey. He wanted to know the age of this canyon. And to find out, he needed to analyze sand and gravel deposited by the river long ago as it was cutting through the rock.
You're looking for pieces of evidence of where the river used to be.
He and some colleagues went searching inside caves. Lots of caves in the canyon walls. And in a few of them, they found ancient river sediments. In the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, they say it looks like this canyon got carved 2.1 million years ago. That makes Hell's Canyon surprisingly young, millions of years younger than Arizona's Grand Canyon. Nell Greenfield-Boyce, NPR News.
Wall Street was closed today in observance of Memorial Day. U.S. futures contracts are trading higher. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from the Lemelson Foundation.
dedicated to improving lives through invention, innovation, and climate action. And the William T. Grant Foundation, supporting research to improve the lives of young people at WTGrantsFDN.org.
From the New York Times, I'm Rachel Abrams. This is The Daily. A few days ago, one of the most ubiquitous live shows in the country, Shen Yun, began its latest run at arguably its most prestigious venue, Lincoln Center. It's drawn thousands of people to a performance that is colorful, acrobatic, and, according to many of its performers, shockingly abusive. Today, my colleague Nicole Hong on what a Times investigation has found about this secretive and sprawling enterprise. It's Monday, May 26th. Nicole, I have seen billboards for Shen Yun literally all over New York City. They are pastel colored, they show people dancing, they're wearing this sort of long, flowy, diaphanous clothing. But I will admit this, I don't think I've ever actually bothered to look into what these billboards were actually advertising. And now you've done this big investigation into Shen Yun, which I'm really excited to talk about. We're going to get to in a minute. But first, can you just tell us what exactly is Shen Yun?
So on the surface, Shen Yun is this performing arts group. They tour around the world. They perform traditional Chinese dance accompanied with a full orchestra. And most people know them because of their advertising.
Every once in a while, something comes along so masterful, it leaves you in awe. This season, take an incredible journey through 5,000 years of culture with Shen Yun.
Like many people, I have seen these for years and never thought twice about what this group was. But in late 2023, my reporting partner, Michael Rothfeld, got a tip from someone who was familiar with the inner workings of Shen Yun and said we should take a closer look at their operations. So we started making phone calls, and of course, we also decided to go to one of their shows in Boston.
And what was that like?
So the tickets were actually quite expensive. Our tickets were over $200.
Wow, okay. It's like going to Broadway.
Yeah. And the show is basically a series of short, very choreographed dance and music pieces. And a lot of the scenes are retelling traditional Chinese folktales and mythology, and the level of dancing is very high level. As I was watching it, it reminded me of Olympic gymnastics or ballet. But as you get deeper into the show, there's this one dance number we saw where a performer is dressed as a police officer for the Chinese Communist Party. And he is beating up this innocent man with a baton in a violent way. And it turns out this man is getting beaten for practicing a religion called Falun Gong. And it becomes clear to you as an audience member as the show progresses that the show is presenting this religion, Falun Gong, as a force for good, fighting against the evil of the Chinese government. So this is not just a dance group. Shen Yun is about spreading the message of this religious movement, Falun Gong, to a mainstream audience. And I got to witness this firsthand because when I went to the Boston show, the man sitting next to me, I saw at intermission, was Googling on his phone, what is Falun Gong? But at the time, we didn't fully understand the bigger picture. We didn't yet know what was really happening behind the scenes.
Exit left.
And when we dug more into Shen Yun, what we uncovered through many months of reporting was this massive operation built on exploitation and coercion, all in service of Falun Gong's religious leader, who has turned Shen Yun into a major source of wealth and influence for his movement.
So tell me about this man and this religious movement.
So this religious movement, Falun Gong, began in China in the early 1990s. And it was started by this man whose Chinese name is Li Hongzhi. He was actually a grain clerk, but somewhere along the way, he starts traveling across China to introduce this new movement he's created. It combines elements of Buddhism with these ancient Chinese energy-based exercises that are known as Qigong. These are basically slow movements where you move your hands and arms around the body to circulate energy. And Li is teaching his followers his version of these exercises, along with spiritual texts that he's written. And he's also saying that this can help you reach enlightenment, that this is the roadmap to becoming a better and more moral person. And he has said that advanced practitioners can develop supernatural powers, like the ability to levitate or the ability to see through walls.
Okay, so that seems kind of out there. Are people buying into it?
Yeah, so it's important to understand the context of what was going on in China at the time. This is the 1990s. Right. It was a period of economic and political turmoil. Mao Zedong, the Communist Party leader, had died not that long ago. And Mao had tried to stamp out traditional culture and traditional religions during his rule.
Turn right.
So when he died, it left a spiritual vacuum in the country. And his death led to this revival of spiritual life in China, including ancient practices like Qigong. So as a result, by the mid-1990s, Falun Gong has followers all over China. Many of them said their health did improve through the meditation exercises. And so the practice becomes extremely popular. Li actually started taking his lectures and his teachings to the Chinese diaspora overseas. And it catches on in many countries like Australia, Canada, and the US as well. But this is where it gets the attention of the Chinese Communist Party.
Straight on.
The group claims its practitioners include as many as 100 million people in China, a figure disputed by the Chinese government.
Obviously, this is an authoritarian regime. They are suspicious of any group they cannot control, especially one that can mobilize large groups of people very quickly. And all of this comes to a head in April 1999. More than 10,000 Falun Gong followers had this rally in Beijing.
It was the largest public assembly in the Chinese capital since the Tiananmen Square demonstrations a decade ago.
And after the rally, Falun Gong is banned in China. China puts out an arrest warrant for Li, and thousands of Falun Gong practitioners are imprisoned. They are sent to labor camps. They are tortured. They are beaten. And some of them never make it out. They died in custody during long prison terms. It was an incredibly brutal response that led many people abroad, including lawmakers in the United States, to consider Falun Gong a persecuted group and a victim of human rights abuses. And I think it's also important to note that this suppression continues to this day.
And then turn
You
left.
mentioned Li earlier, the founder of Falun Gong. So where is he in the middle of all this?
Turn left.
So by the late 1990s, in the middle of the persecution, Li and his family have settled in the United States, in New York. This is now his new home base where he directs this global movement. And the persecution becomes this huge galvanizing and organizing force. And he starts to portray the situation as this existential battle between the Chinese government and Falun Gong. It becomes a fight for survival. So, in part to draw global attention to the persecution and to continue to spread the religion, Li and his followers have this idea to put on a traveling show. And that's how, in 2006, Shen Yun was born.
Got it. But given that this show is essentially propaganda, how successful could the show actually be?
So this show has ended up becoming this huge moneymaker for Falun Gong.
Here we are.
We are able to
Safe
look at
and
their
sound.
tax records because it's registered as a nonprofit. And By the end of 2023, they have $266 million in assets. They're making tens of millions of dollars a year in ticket sales. And they're stockpiling assets at a rate that would be extraordinary for any type of performing arts company.
Right.
Let alone this nonprofit dance group.
So how is this possible? How are they making so much money with this show?
It's possible because Lee has these legions of followers in countries all over the world who are devoted to him, devoted to this fight against the Chinese Communist Party, and are willing to make all of these sacrifices for him. But what our reporting uncovered was the extent of that sacrifice, because the success of Shen Yun has also come at this extraordinary cost, and much of it has been at the expense of Lee's most loyal followers, who have sometimes dedicated their entire lives and livelihoods to carry out his vision.
We'll be right back.
The Daily is supported by WSJ Plus, a news bundle that brings together business and finance insights from the Wall Street Journal, MarketWatch, Barron's, and Investors Business Daily, all on one platform so readers can explore every angle.
And by This Old House Radio Hour podcast, answering listeners' DIY and renovation questions and diving into design and building science trends. This Old House Radio Hour podcast available in podcast apps. Get the story firsthand with The Daily from the New York Times, distributed by American Public Media.
Keep right.
What you hear on this station, every report, every interview, every update, is only here because someone like you gave.
Right.
80% of Houston Public Media's funding comes from Houstonians like you. Our newsroom runs on support from you, our community.
You have the right to know what's going on, and you have the power to make sure others do too.
Join the community right now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
I want to make a movie about this.
The Arts Hour brings you film.
The themes in it are so far ahead of their time.
Books.
The detail is amazing.
Art.
There's all the personal stuff.
Theatre.
Lots of singing and dancing and colours.
Music.
The dance floor is made for dancing.
And everything in between.
I want it to be exciting.
That's the Arts Hour with me, Nikki Beatty.
I really identified with it.
From the BBC.
The Arts Hour, Friday nights at 9 on News 88.7.
A few days ago, one of the most ubiquitous live shows in the country, Shen Yun, began its latest run at arguably its most prestigious venue, Lincoln Center. It's drawn thousands of people to a performance that is colorful, acrobatic, and, according to many of its performers, shockingly abusive. My colleague Nicole Hong on what a Times investigation has found about this secretive and sprawling enterprise. So, Nicole, your investigation pulls back the curtain on the inner workings of this show. Walk us through how all of this works.
So, there are three main ways that Shen Yun is essentially built on the backs of its followers. One has to do with the performers in Shen Yun, the dancers and musicians. The second has to do with the Falun Gong followers who help to finance the shows. And the third way involves the Falun Gong practitioners who run and operate this sophisticated media network to promote the show and also attack its critics. So
straight on.
We interviewed dozens of dancers, musicians, and instructors who used to perform for Shen Yun or work for Shen Yun. And what we learned was that many of the performers in Shen Yun are brought to New York when they are as young as 11 years old. They come from all over the world, and their parents were very eager to send them to Shen Yun because this dance group is seen as a holy honor for any practitioner to participate in. And the way they join this group is that they're brought to this enormous 400-acre compound called Dragon Springs, where Lee himself is based. And so these young performers end up living and training at Dragon Springs, sometimes well into their 20s. And what we found in our interviews is that it was a very grueling environment, both physically and mentally. Many of them described often working or training 15 hours a day, 6 days a week. We spoke to a lot of people who said they weren't paid at all during their first year on tour. Their access to outside information is heavily controlled. Some students told us they got in trouble if they were caught watching unapproved movies or listening to music that was created after the year 1900.
Wow, okay.
And one of the things we heard repeatedly from people is that they were discouraged from seeking medical help if they got injured, and this is tied to Lee's teachings. He says that negative karma causes illness and that if you're a true believer, you can expel that from your body. So, for example, we spoke to one dancer who said that right before a performance, she was practicing a flip and then dislocated her kneecap. One of her classmates popped it back into place, and she just performed through it for 2 hours in completely excruciating pain. But she was terrified to ask for medical treatment. There was also this former violinist in Shen Yun's orchestra who told us that he started feeling these sharp pains in his shoulder. So he was brought to see Lee, who touched his shoulder and then told him he was healed. It wasn't until years later that he discovered the cause of the pain was actually a bulging disc in his spine.
Why do people put up with this, or why do their parents let them stay?
It has a lot to do with what Lee was telling the performers about their duty to Shen Yun. We learned that Lee was telling them the purpose of a Shen Yun show is not only to educate audiences, but to actually save them from the end times.
Wow.
And some of the performers said they were told that any mistakes they made on stage could actually doom their audiences to hell.
Wow.
Another reason that many of them are terrified to leave is financial. They get free tuition, free housing, free food. It's a full scholarship to a boarding school, essentially. And when they try to quit, many of them are told, if you leave, you're gonna have to pay all of that back. Now, we did not actually hear from anyone that they tried to seek repayment, but the threat of it was enough to keep many of them there. And that's not the only way his followers are propping up the mission. They're also giving large amounts of their money to Lee's movement. So the way these Shen Yun shows work, they put on hundreds of shows a year during their world tour, and there are a lot of costs to putting on a show. The ads, the billboards, hotel rooms, and meals for the performers, the venue. In each location, most of the costs for putting on that show are taken on by local followers of Falun Gong. And these are essentially unpaid volunteers who organize to put on Shen Yun shows. And if the shows do well, they get their money back, but any profit has to go back to Shen Yun. If the shows lose money, the followers are the ones responsible for making up that shortfall.
So they're in a very vulnerable position.
Right. And Lee has publicly said that ticket sales are a sign of your spiritual devotion. So many followers feel this urgent pressure to sell as many tickets as they can. And this helps explain why in your local city you might see so many ads for Shen Yun.
But where's the money going? Like, how is it being used?
So we don't exactly know. A lot of their financial records are opaque.
So, Nicole, I also want to come back to something you said earlier, because you mentioned that even beyond all of that, there's actually a third piece of this puzzle.
Right. That is their media arm, primarily a newspaper run by Falun Gong practitioners called the Epoch Times.
I've heard of it, but tell us a little bit more about it.
It was initially started by Falun Gong followers in the year 2000 as a way to raise awareness about human rights abuses in China, including the persecution of Falun Gong. And it specifically rose to prominence in the US after the 2016 presidential election by promoting right-wing conspiracy theories and also by embracing President Donald J. Trump as someone who supports the paper's opposition to the Chinese Communist Party. But beyond their political coverage, what our investigation found was that they have also published more than 17,000 articles about Shen Yun.
Oh, wow. So it seems clear that these followers, in many cases, have been quite mistreated. I'm curious about the response to that part of your reporting, about that mistreatment.
So, since we've published our reporting, New York State regulators have been looking into Shenyun for their labor practices. We also found out that there's a federal criminal investigation into Shenyun, including into their finances. And a former dancer has sued them and accused them of forced labor.
And how has Lee and Falun Gong responded to all of this?
They've denied wrongdoing. They say that everything they're doing is legal. A major part of their response to our reporting is to say that our sources are Chinese spies, they're agents of the Chinese government.
Turn left.
You know, their followers have relentlessly attacked the Times. They've attacked me personally.
Oh, wow, during the course of your reporting?
Yeah, so this is their playbook for responding to scrutiny or criticism.
You know, I can't help but notice that there's a certain kind of irony here, that this group that flees China because of persecution comes to the United States and kind of starts acting like a persecutor.
So that has been one of the themes that's come up over and over again in our interviews with people who either personally survived the persecution in China or had family members go through it. They've come to the United States as refugees. They're seeking asylum. They want to be able to practice their religion freely and chase the American dream here. And many of them were so happy when they got into Shenyun. And when they got to Dragon Springs, they just felt this overwhelming sense of relief. So it was especially devastating once they actually saw how the group operated, that this thing that they had devoted their entire lives to turned out to be something completely different.
Nicole, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
The Daily is supported by Progressive. Progressive Commercial Auto Insurance protects the cars, trucks, and vans that work to keep small businesses moving forward, including protection while running errands and other tasks. More at progressivecommercial.com. And by This Is Uncomfortable, a podcast from Marketplace hosted by Rima Crace. You can hear stories about life and how money messes with it. New episodes available wherever you get your podcasts. And by American Public Media.
The Daily is powered by the journalism of the New York Times. It's distributed by APM, American Public Media. You can go deeper into the stories you hear on The Daily at nytimes.com/thedaily. That's it for The Daily. I'm Rachel Abrams. See you tomorrow.
I'm Natalie Weber. I wanted to become a journalist because I really enjoy informing the community and letting them know about what's happening in local politics, in their school boards, and telling interesting stories. Fort Bend County is a really interesting place to cover because it's the second largest county in the Houston area, and it's a really diverse area. It's also growing super rapidly, and it's expected to reach 1.1 million residents by 2030, and I think that makes it a really interesting place to cover.
Let's find a new route. Gentle parenting is hard, even for the super practitioners like influencer Olivia Owen.
And when you're all done, then we can get you down and you can go play with the toys.
It's hard to hear a toddler out.
So we definitely will get in the face of our toddler and ask him how he's feeling and help him have feelings words.
It's hard to explain this mess to your boomer parents.
And I think that they are super skeptical of what we're doing.
And it is very, very hard for your parents to understand what you even think you're doing.
It's
Go
just
straight
exhausting.
on and then turn
They
right.
just go round and round and round talking.
So why are we doing it? Ahead, Today Explained is for the children.
Hopefully we don't raise a serial killer.
Absolutely crazy. First News. Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Dan Ronan.
Police in Liverpool, England say a 53-year-old man is in custody after he allegedly drove a minivan into a crowd of soccer fans at a parade to honor the city's Premier League team. Police this evening held a news conference where they said that 27 people are hospitalized, and authorities say they believe the crash is an isolated incident and not an act of terror. President Trump, Vice President Vance, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth all took part in the wreath-laying ceremony this morning at Arlington's Tomb of the Unknown Soldier outside Washington. Trump paid tribute to veterans who died in America's wars, but as NPR's Jacqueline Diaz reports, he later waded into politics.
In a speech following the ceremony, Trump praised the men and women of the military who gave their lives and the Gold Star families that were left behind. After speaking about the first soldiers who died during the American Revolution, Trump took shots at former President Biden's administration.
Their valor gave us the freest, greatest, and most noble republic ever to exist on the face of the earth.
Go straight on.
A republic that I am fixing after a long and hard 4 years.
Get
that was
ready
a
to turn
hard
right.
4 years we went through.
Earlier in the day, in a
Turn
Memorial
right.
Day post on social media, Trump also lashed out at the former administration for its immigration policies and at judges who have blocked the Trump administration's agenda. Jacqueline Diaz, NPR News.
King Charles is in Ottawa on a visit that Canada's leaders say will underscore that nation's sovereignty at a time when President Trump has made repeated calls for the U.S. to annex Canada. Charles will deliver a major address to open a new session of Parliament on Tuesday. The King is the head of state of Canada and 13 other Commonwealth states, including the UK. It's only the third time King or Queen has opened Parliament. From Washington, this is NPR. Former Democratic Congressman Charlie Rangel, who represented Harlem in Congress for nearly 50 years, died today at the age of 94. NPR's Ava Pukach brings us this remembrance.
Rangel served in Congress from 1971 through 2017. He co-founded the Congressional Black Caucus during his first term. He spoke about that to C-SPAN in a retirement interview.
It was then that we said that collectively we can be a major force of influence rather than individually, and that it would make no difference what part of the country that we came from.
Rangel later became the first black chair of the Congressional Ways and Means Committee. Prior to his time in Congress, Rangel served in the U.S. Army, earning a Purple Heart and Bronze Star in the Korean War. Ava Pukach, NPR News.
A court in Germany convicted 4 former managers of Volkswagen of fraud, 2 of them receiving